Welcome to Business Insider, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark.
The purpose of today is to get some insight into the Hazeltine brand, because as I warned you in the beginning, you are an interesting entity on the coast because you have been through a re-engineering of sorts, and I'd love to start there and talk about, I guess, strategies that have worked in this re-engineering, and maybe strategies that you look back on and say, oh, I might have done that a little differently. So let's talk about that, and maybe the introduction should include the Master Foods starting point, which was 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so I guess a little bit about my background. I actually moved to the coast 20 years ago to work for Master Foods, and I was a handful of managers who moved at the time and was pretty committed, A, to moving to the country, B, raising a family, and also to Master Foods. So I worked for Mars for 20 years and for Master Foods most of those years, but whilst I was positioned at Master Foods, I did various roles. Some were Mars Inc. roles, some were Master Foods roles. And I guess one of the things that does make me unique is that I was quite early on, interestingly, often the only woman in a very male-dominated world, in particular in customer service, freight and logistics. And over the years, they would often tried to get me into the personnel side, and I probably a bit stubbornly resisted, saying, no, I love the supply side of business. And the other interesting, well, one of the other interesting things is that my husband's always been a house husband, which has said that I've always been the breadwinner, because we realised at Mars that it was such a huge career that really, if you want to bring up kids, only one person could really do that, and that was because Mars, I guess in the kindest way possible, owned you and wanted every bit of your life. And I know you're going to ask me about like work-life balance later on, but I'd say that I didn't have much work-life balance whilst at Mars, so that's been a clear objective for me, having left Master Foods 3 years ago on Mars. The last role I had at Master Foods was the CEO role, and I was in that role for close to 5 years.
To get that into perspective, how many female CEOs were in Master Foods at that time?
Maybe 4 or 5 in Mars, of probably, well, Mars employed about 40,000 people. They probably had around the 100 general managers sort of mark at that time. So there's really less than 10 senior women in the Mars corporation at the time that I was heading the business. So yeah, not
quite reflective of the population mix.
No,
10% out of 100. Okay.
That's true, but I think us women are used to that.
Can I branch out there? Are you patiently getting ready for it to be better, or is it actively changing? You've seen it now for 20 years of Mars, and being a rarity, a female in those senior roles.
Yeah, no, I'm not actively. I mean, if you look at a lot of the statistics, they've improved slightly for women in senior management and in very senior roles. And if you look at statistics for women in board positions, I think it's gone from like 6% now to 10%. But my belief is, unless it's made mandatory, which I don't actually agree with in terms of statistics, it won't change. So it really is, it's just going to take time.
Yeah, okay. If we go on and look at maybe some of the strategies you've employed, maybe since leaving Mars, are there two that stand out that says, okay, well, this is what the Hazeltine brand is about and how I've moved it forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one for me, which is something Mars teaches you very, very clearly, is to be in control, to be in control of your own destiny. No matter where you're going, what you're doing, be really clear and have clarity about what you're after, and then take control. Don't say, oh, maybe I'll go in with somebody else, or be waiting on somebody else. So my strategy has always been be in control and be clear about where you're going, and then put actions and plans in place to do that. And additionally, I'd add to that to be decisive. I think, you're going to ask me a little later about what gets me going, but you have to be decisive. We don't ever know all of the answers, but if you make a decision based on what you have at the time, at least making a decision is usually better than not making a decision. So that's my number one, I guess, is being clear in leadership.
Yeah. Have you've seen success and failure based on those? I guess the toughest decision you've made in those last 3 years, what would that be?
I think was having to change direction a little bit. When I left Masterfoods, I was very clear about climate change and setting up a business on the coast in sustainability and helping businesses in climate change. What I quickly realised was that sustainability wasn't just climate change. Sustainability, especially when the global financial crisis hit, was about being a healthy, well-rounded business that was going to stay around for the longer term. And that's about getting all the balances right. It's finances, it's growth, it's cost cutting, it's people, it's culture. And sustainability, or the bits that we know as climate change, is a subset of that. And I sort of got that wrong to begin with. So I had to sort of turn around and say, hey, you know, on reflection, it is still the right direction, and that's been quite tough. Yeah.
Because that's about decisiveness, saying, okay, that part is finished now. Someone talked about burning boats.
Yeah.
You say, done, I've given it a shot, now move on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's my bit about making decisions and actually saying no, and having, I guess, the energy to move on and actually say, look, I got that wrong. Or, yeah.
How important is, I love that phrase, saying no. How important is that in your, when you look back at your history, the ability to say no? You said it to moving a senior player into personnel. Is no a good word in business, do you think?
You asked me, yes, I think it is, but I think it's a balanced no. So, for example, one of the things, if you read about women in business, one of the things that we often do is say yes to everybody to please everybody, because we say that if we do 200% of our job, that will get us the big job, that will get us the corner office. In reality, that's not right. So you have to be able to say no based on what you believe, where you're going, your directions. And I come back to some of the 4 words that have really helped me in life when I'm working out where I'm going. One is setting objectives, setting goals, setting strategies against them, and setting measures. And if you're asked to do something that's not really within that path, you better to say no, because you'll get distracted along the way and you won't do what you want to do or what you've been asked to do. Yeah.
Excellent. I love those words. Love those words.
What? No.
No, the planning and objectives. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, no works as well. I'm an advocate for no. A lot of people I talk to do believe the answer is yes, and then try and work out how to deliver on it. Saying no gives you so much more freedom, and control, which is a key word as well.
Can I just elaborate one little piece on that? Doing work or with businesses in terms of consulting work to work out where they're going, the biggest issue I see with companies is that they have lost their way because they've said yes. Instead of their core business being maybe it's making a product, they suddenly find themselves making it, selling it, starting a cafe on the sideline, maybe doing some weddings, and what's happened to them is they become very distracted from their core business. So that's why I again come back to saying that actually no is quite good if you realise what your core business purpose is.
I agree totally. Okay, next 12 months will be interesting. No arguments. We have an incredibly, apparently, robust economy. What sort of strategies are you going to look at? Do you have some focus for this next year, this next 12 months, some measures in place?
Yes, I do. I think the most important again is coming back to clarity, clarity of where you're going in the direction, and then really setting out to communicate around that. So that could come through networking, it could come through social networking.
Can we be specific? Like your Margaret's brand now? Like,
Margaret's brand? Yeah. Sure. For me, it's about making sure I get my profile out there, making sure that I am communicating to people that my services are available, making sure that I continue my energy to actually get myself out there. And that could be through written media, or actually just being there and saying hi, or actually just watching what's happening in my space and saying I can put my hand up for that. Because I think people forget. I think there's a bit of a time when people forget you're around, so I think it is time with an economy picking up that you refresh people's memories and say, hey, I'm here.
Yeah. Are you a social the social media stuff?
I'm too old for that. It's not entirely true, but I think I struggle a little bit with Twitter and Facebook. But I still believe, a bit old-fashioned, that if you can get a flyer or a letter or a phone call, people are responding to that because they're sort of overwhelmed by the social networks. So I think it's very important, and I think it depends on your business. But for me personally, it is brand me.
Yeah.
So I think my best selling tool is me picking up the phone or me making contact with people.
And it is personal. Like
Personal, very personal, yeah.
We got all that sorted out.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. Work with Mars, you have no life.
Correct. You have a Mars life.
Excuse me, you must have, because you've got 3 children, and they're all older than 3. So, so tell me, can you manage work-life, or it's just about knowing roles? It's like...
It's about roles, it's about being really organised. It's also about letting go of a lot of things that you know that you'd love to be able to go to, but you have to choose. You have to say, I've made this choice. And the rewards are that, Mars rewards you well, and so now my time is actually giving a lot of my time back to my kids, and that's fantastic. Work-life balance, in hindsight, I could have got better, and the thing that my strategy now is to get it in the diary. So if it's a tennis comp on a Friday, it's in the diary, and you have to say, I'm sorry, I've got a commitment that day. And same with kids' appointments. If it's really important, I think it's really important to make sure it's in that diary. But you do have to trade off. Sometimes if something comes up, you've actually got to say which is more important here. So.
But again, it comes back to that word. I like your words. That not often enough, or too often, we say, I can't do it, as opposed to saying, I make this choice.
Yes.
And it's about, for you, it's about control. And if you make a choice, it's a controlled choice. So.
I guess my reflection of 20 years with Mars, it was an analogy that was given to me, which I've sort of hold now quite dearly, is that when you work for a company, especially a big company, you're part of their tribe. And when you become a leader in a company, you actually get given almost your own tent, and you have your own tribe within the tent. When you leave a company, you then don't belong to that tribe, and you don't have your own tent, and you have to then work through, as you go forward, what are the decisions you're going to make, which families or tribes or what are you going to belong to, and which ones are you going to be special and you're going to put more energy or effort into. And that's one of my, now with reflection of 3 years, that's one of my trade-offs about which choice am I going to make here. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. It's going to be an interesting 12 months.
Indeed. Considering that, let's have a rant. You have your soapbox, 60 seconds.
My 60 seconds would be very clearly on embracing change and having the energy to embrace change. It infuriates me that people think that something's being done to them, or they can't help their situation, or they can't move forward, when they just don't stop and have a look and say, hey, I'm in control here, I'm an adult, I'm making the decisions, and I can do something about that. And I think that can-do mentality is absolutely my one rant, which is don't blame others, don't think someone else is going to hand it to you. If you want it to happen, make it happen yourself. Take control.
That's a great 60 seconds. Thank you. Can we go back to your tribe, the tribe you left, and the tent? I love that. I love it. There are lots of people going through that transition now. Either chosen or repurposed, re-engineered, whatever they're called. Some in your choice, as your choice. If you looked at advice or some thoughts that they could take with them, what would they be? Just a pathway.
I think that is a really difficult one. The first thing is, I think, taking some time. I think you do have to have time out from, you can't just, if you're a loyal person, especially a lot of us people who have been working for a long time for lots of companies, you don't just switch off. You can't move on. It actually stays with you for the rest of your life. So you have to acknowledge that and welcome that, and then you have to take some time to say, what is it that was going to push my buttons? What is it that I'm going to get something from? And for me, it was around giving something back. How do I give something back? I made jars of Dolmio and pet food and chocolate bars for many, many years. And so that put me on a pathway of saying, whether it be sustainability, whether it be on boards and working with education, whether it be not-for-profit organisations, whether it be just helping small businesses that really haven't had the fortune to have the experience that I have. So I think it has to be something that really gives you some fulfilment and some enjoyment to do that. And I think the other bit of the question was around, you know, this whole social networking and the linking side of things. I think you have to embrace that. Like, I think having a fantastic resume or CV and keeping it very current is really important. And putting it out on all of those forums, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, you know, social, any of those, making sure you're very, very accessible, and then choosing to network in your own way. So if someone makes contact with you, you know, always do the polite thing and go back to, because there's nothing more. If you're a bit of my rant, it's nothing worse when people don't return your phone calls, or they just don't even have the common decency to have good manners about it. And I think the age group we are in, we expect the good manners. So I think it's about making sure you're clear about what is it that you want out of life. And can I digress for a second?
Please.
One of the first management conferences I ever attended, I was probably in my early 20s, and I was asked, we were sat down as a group of managers, and we were told to write our obituary, and I was a bit sort of taken back. And that obituary was obviously how you wanted to be remembered when you came to the end of your life or your career or whatever it was. And that's always stuck with me in my mind, in that, you know, did I want to be remembered about I had the best house, the best car, the best boat, you know, or did I really want to be remembered as someone who had done their best in whatever they could, given to people, you know, in terms of generous. I believe I'm a generous in terms of giving my time and my hopefully my sense of humour, and so I think that's a really interesting thing about when you get to another change in life, thinking about that obituary and taking yourself back and saying,
have you rewritten it?
I have.
Okay.
I have, and it hasn't, to a certain extent, it hasn't changed much, but because I'm a people person, really. Yeah.
But it impacts your strategies, doesn't it? That
absolutely.
fine-tuning.
Yeah.
So okay.
If you want to know more, you'll
yes, you'll have to buy the book.
Yeah, you'll have to buy the book. That's right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.